Welcome into another hour of CBS Sports HQ. Jeremy St. Louis, happy to have you along. Major League Baseball's trade deadline just over 24 hours away. We're going to get the latest on the pursuit of Juan Soto from our Jim Bowden this hour. NFL training camp's continuing, so we'll check in on that. And of course, the big news of the day, the Cleveland Browns are now planning for at least their first 6 games without quarterback Deshaun Watson. Former federal judge Sue L. Robinson informing the league Monday that Watson did violate the league's personal conduct policy and should be suspended for 6 weeks. Robinson made the decision after reviewing thousands of documents and testimony regarding the former Pro Bowler's alleged off-field conduct. Watson faced civil lawsuits from 24 different women accusing him of sexual assault or misconduct. Now, under this suspension, Watson's first game back will be on October 23rd when the Browns visit the Ravens in Week 7. Now, the NFL has released a statement about the decision, saying we thank Judge Robinson for her review of the record and attention during a 3-day hearing that resulted in her finding multiple violations of the NFL's personal conduct policy by Deshaun Watson. The NFL or the NFLPA, on behalf of Watson, may appeal the decision within 3 days in light of her findings. The league is reviewing Judge Robinson's imposition of a 6-game suspension and will make a determination on the next steps. Our Josina Anderson is in Carolina for us today at Panthers camp in Spartanburg, but she's been following every step of this story for us along the way. Josina, you tweeted out that Watson's camp is not happy with this suspension. They firmly believe it should be 0 games. Now, you saw the statement. The NFL still has an opportunity to appeal the suspension to make it longer. What's the latest?
Well, that's the interesting thing. So we already knew that they possessed the right to appeal, but in the statement, they basically underlined that they are still reviewing and considering that right, thereby not immediately announcing that they're just going to instantly abide by the discipline that Sue Robinson handed out in her decision today. And so that puts Deshaun Watson in a bit of a precarious situation relative to the fact that the NFL was initially pursuing an indefinite suspension, at the very least a year. He gets 6 games via Sue Robinson, which obviously and notably far less than that, but still cannot, for figurative language, rest in that right now, as we are still waiting to find out if the NFL is going to pursue that right. Now, I did think that it was interesting, as I basically had a very cursory review of Sue Robinson's decision, that she mentioned in one of the aspects per, her thought process, that she noted that the NFL in other cases involving nonviolent sexual misconduct, in particularly one case, and didn't name the player, at least not for the portion that I read, in that one case, she noted that they got a 3-game suspension, or obviously far less. And so she underlined, per her language, in the spirit of just being fair and equitable, that this was, included in her decision to give the games, or the amount rather, that she gave to Deshaun Watson. And I also thought it was interesting that she also mentioned that even with that, that she felt that he still violated the conduct policy, one, by, in her words, the tardy reporting of the first lawsuit, and also with the ad hoc considerations of the definition of conduct detrimental, that that basically, in simpler terms, that she foresees, or that rather Deshaun Watson could, the consequence of his behavior. And I obviously will take more time to read her decision in full, but off the cursory review, I thought those 2 points were notable.
Our Justina Anderson in Spartanburg, South Carolina. The Carolina Panthers having camp today. They did have a press conference just a little while ago. Justina, you were there. I had the chance to ask Baker Mayfield a couple of questions. So let's listen to what Baker had to say about Deshaun Watson's decision.
That honestly is none of my business. I don't play against the other quarterback. I know it's the most cliche thing to say, but that's just the truth. When it comes down to it, I'm game planning against their defense. And if I'm playing or not, I'm trying to help this team win. And that's my mindset going into it, so I got to keep getting better. But I'm not focused about week 1 right now. Working on each day, each install, and continuing to get better. And we'll handle that when it comes. But for now, it's about getting the Panthers better and our offense continuing to get better as well. No, I mean, I'm paid to play quarterback and lead this team, and not to make decisions on anything other than that.
Of course, Baker Mayfield is going to see his former team in Week 1. Justina, what kind of involvement can Deshaun Watson have with his team moving forward during the suspension?
So I will answer that really quickly. I just wanted to say that I was waiting to see Baker's reaction when he saw that it was me standing there asking those questions. And I do want to say that he answered everything very professionally, as I would expect that he would. And obviously taking the Deshaun Watson news in stride. Relative to what we can expect with Deshaun, at first we have to hear what's happening with the appeal and whether the NFL will exercise its rights. And I still, as I talked about this in the first hit, have to fully clarify with this with the league. We are all under a new process under the CBA right now relative to this process. But my understanding is that we have to wait for the appeal, that in advance of that, my understanding is that Deshaun Watson can practice. And then at some point, this will become final. Deshaun Watson gets put on the commissioner's suspended list. And my question, which I haven't gotten answered yet, is if that happens immediately, or does it happen in terms of the placement on the commissioner's suspension list right at the start of the regular season? Regardless of where that takes place, what it does say in the CBA is that once the player is placed on the commissioner's suspension list, that he can come back at the second half of whatever that duration is, back to club activities, into the facility and what have you. So that note is different because the discipline and when a player can come back under the personal conduct policy is different from when a player can come back relative to a suspension with the PED policy. So there's more time removed when it's under the personal conduct policy, whereas you can still spend time with the PED policy relative to the time before the season starts.
Josina, there is some thought that in the court of public opinion, no suspension would ever be enough punishment for Watson. Pro Football Talk put out a poll asking fans about the decision. Over 30,000 votes, close to 80% have said they don't agree. What does this decision mean for things moving forward in regards to future rulings for other players? What kind of precedent could this set?
As far as what aspect of it?
Well, just in terms of the punishment, like looking at the seriousness of these allegations, the fact that it was 24 women. When you look at the comparison to other suspensions and other punishments that have been handed out by the NFL, there is a thought that there's just not the consistency here. So Sue L. Robinson, this is her first big decision. What kind of a precedent could it set moving forward in terms of the NFL meting out punishment? Does it even matter if there's any legal proceedings or not? That seems to be what the case is here.
So I definitely hear your point in your question. A couple points of clarification there. So with the NFL, when they were doing its investigation, they initially were investigating 12 women. After the investigation of 12 women, they narrowed it down to a focus of 5. And then from 5 at issue became 4, which was a part of our reporting from CBS Sports. After one of those women, their desires to make her a part of the 5 was based on the reporting from a media report. And so I believe, per my understanding, at least what we were hearing while the deliberation was going on and the hearing was going on, that at issue it was 4 of 12 initially, and obviously there's 25 that got knocked down to 24 that filed civil lawsuits, and which is independent of the NFL scope. So just want to clarify that aspect. Relative to your question, what precedent does it set? I think that you have to take into account a couple of things. The process under which Sue Robinson made her decision is very distinct from what it was prior to the 2020 CBA. There was no neutrality in the process. It was just Roger Goodell being judge and jury. Now, per a jointly appointed hearing officer, that being Sue Robinson, the purpose of that was to insert neutrality, and that's what she represents. She does not have a dog in this fight or any partisanship relative to that. So the fact that she doesn't represent that or have that, did her review of hundreds of documents of evidence that each side presented, relative to the hearing, and then came out with this decision after that review, even when you consider the public thrust and all of the emotion that's out there that she easily could have carried into, and still landed on the opposite side of the median relative to where she put her flagpole with the spectrum of discipline, I think is notable. Not to also forget, not that this should have any bearing, but still you notice it and you know it, that she is female. So the fact that all of those things took place that I said, and she ended up at 6, and underlined that in the beginning of that decision, that the NFL for her tries to be fact-facing, but doesn't necessarily appear so in the way that they carry out their business, I think is notable. And the fact that she also wanted to underline that she feels like it's very important to be equitable and just relative to the discipline and the history of recommendations that have happened before. Now, when I started off talking about Deshaun's discipline, one of the things that I said was that she noticed that in nonviolent sexual misconduct cases, and this one case where she underlined that happened, that the games were just 3. And so she said that even though the NFL was saying that each case is not evenly situated, but at the same time she was saying, but they're still trying to equate, per her findings, nonviolent versus violent. So she didn't find that fair. And that was her words, obviously, relative to the decision.
And obviously, as you mentioned, I mean, we're going to probably get more clarity once we get a chance to actually look at the final decision and how she came to the decision that she did.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.